Hey everyone, how is everyone going? I've got a HP Z230 workstation machine here. It's a little bit different from the stuff that I normally work with, but I'm taking a page out of Phil's computer lab book, and I've got a old machine from work for free. It has a few issues though, and one of them being the capacitors in the power supply are bulging and the mains wiring is splitting, so very safe. Looks like the insulation on the wiring has failed. I needed a few bits and pieces, and I was using this machine while I was house sitting a while ago, and I did some live streaming with it. So yeah, I figured why not throw a few bits and pieces at it, and we'll see what sort of machine I can make. Components inside of the chassis are actually quite well laid out, and I guess being a workstation machine it has to be for good and quick servicing, but yeah, we've got ourselves a K600 NVIDIA Quadro GPU, it's pretty terrible. We've got ourselves a Xeon E3-1230 version 3 CPU. For storage, I've got just a normal 2TB hard drive. I think it was a leftover from the office, and an SSD which I dug out of an old server, 600GB Intel SSD, works quite well. I've also got 24GB of RAM as well, 1600 MHz DDR3. The machine itself does support ECC memory as well, which is quite nice to have. Access to the machine is very easy, just one sort of handle there, and yeah, here's my donor power supply. We've actually got two of these machines. I've got a small form factor tower which is being sent off for e-recycling, and I grabbed the tower version. I wanted the tower version to fit more components into, and given the other one is going to e-recycling because it's well and truly out of service and has been stored in a cupboard for the past 3 years, I decided to grab the power supply. Mainly just because I wanted the mains wiring to replace the cracked insulated stuff from the other one. Getting into this power supply was a bit more annoying. There's only 4 screws, but yeah, it sort of comes off in a bit of a clamshell. Thankfully, the cabling and mains wiring on this one looked good, so I decided to pillage that out. Easier said than done though. You'll see this soon. It's kind of clipped in with these weird little safety clips. Everything's held in with glue. I don't know why they did that. I guess they don't want parts moving around, but yeah, of course the mains socket is secured in with a screw and nut deal, so there's not enough room to get a proper socket driver in here, so I'm just using good old pin nose pliers to get in there and just undo it, flipping it around and having to of course do both sides. Removing the old wiring should have been the easier job, or the donor wiring I should say, but you know, given it's a single-sided board, I found out they've got a little it's like security latch sort of mechanism going on here. It's kind of like a pin for a Molex connector or something. There's a tiny little bit of metal that sticks up that stops you pulling the cable through, so you have to pinch it. But I managed to figure it out, and it was the same with the other one as well, so I just got my pin nose pliers on there, gave her a good squeeze, and then yeah, out it comes. But yeah, getting the old solder working braid in there to try and clear those veers up enough to get the little latch mechanism compressed was quite interesting. First time I sort of seen this. I mean, I don't normally touch or remove these things because they're fine, but I guess the type of cheap insulation that was used in this power supply, yeah, means that we have to deal with this now. But yeah, other than that, it was a little bit tricky to get the pins pushed back through because of those latch mechanisms, but managed to do it, and a nice good wad of solder in there to hold it down, so it's, you know, it's not going to come loose or anything like that. So yeah, overall that repair, or part of the repair, wasn't too bad, but yeah, had to faff around a bit with that latch mechanism. Breaking out the desoldering gun to remove the failed capacitors. It's quite funny actually seeing a power supply this new with failed capacitors. I thought it was sort of something that only happened in the early 2000s, you know, Pentium 4 era, but or I guess Core 2 Duo era as well, but I guess yeah, this manufacturer used cheap rubbish capacitors and half of them are all swollen, so the machine did have some power issues and things like that, and given what I've got in mind for a build with this machine, I kind of want the power supply to be top notch. It is sadly in this model a proprietary pin out and fit out for the ATX connector, and it's only 320 watts. So I can't say I can recommend the Z230 for any cheap gaming rigs because of that, but I haven't looked online to see if there's any aftermarket adapters and things that you can use on this power supply to convert like a normal ATX PSU to HP's standard for their motherboard. But anyway, the new capacitors soldered in just fine. Well, fitting the new capacitors was pretty easy. Thankfully, single layer board, as I said, makes the job a lot easier than a multi-layer board. The old ones, yeah, they're just slightly bulged. I'm sure they'll test bad, but yeah, it's always a bad thing having capacitors like this in a power circuit, just ripple and probably all sorts of horrible things. But yeah, 4 screws go into the circuit board. I would have had footage of removing this power supply and board and everything, but I sadly must have deleted that by mistake. First time that's happened, and hopefully few and far between, but yeah. Anyway, 4 screws, as I said, holding down the circuit board in each corner, and this tool is really handy, just being able to put the lock washer nut on one end, and then you can get your Phillips screwdriver, which is far too long for the job. You can see me trying to wrangle it in through the back here, and then yeah, I've got my extension, which makes it really wobbly to reach through to get the nut on. I dropped it quite a few times in filming this, but you know, smoke and mirrors and the movie magic and all of that means you guys don't know any different, but now they've just revealed that dirty secret, we'll carry on. It wasn't too hard getting that socket back in once I figured this trick out, so, and you can get good torque on it there as well, means it's nice and locked in. Throwing a cheeky zip tie around the mains, the ATX power connector. You can see here some of the wiring and plugs and things are not standard. Well, actually you would have if I'd actually filmed that part, but there you go, you can see it kind of there. It looks a bit strange. There's some weird connectors down by my pinky finger, but yeah, the small form factor one's even worse than that, so don't know what HP were thinking, and Dell and all these OEMs, because I tell you, having a 320 watt power supply, man, it limits what you can do with the machine really much, but regardless it works, so we'll put it back together. The chassis itself is actually pretty easy to work on, thankfully, in this machine. All the components are very easy to get to, but yeah, just putting a fresh coin cell battery in here as well just never hurts to have a nice fresh one. I have actually checked it. But yeah, we'll just power it up and hopefully nothing explodes, but yeah, seems to be doing the job, or so I thought. This machine has an issue. The dreaded 6-beat postcode. It indicates a problem detecting the video card actually, which is a bit of a shame because that K600 is a bit faster than the spare card I had kicking around, which is a GeForce GT 620, but it's all I had spare that works without requiring external power for the graphics, so yeah, that will have to do, but hey, at least the machine now posts. So, as you can see by my overexposed shot, we do have post messages. We'll button the machine up and have a look at some of the hardware and software and games and things like that. Yeah, I've got a few ideas of a few upgrades I want to do with this machine. Off camera, I did put a sneaky little Sound Blaster Live 24-bit card in there. It supports EAX and all that good stuff just to get some better sound, especially if you want to stream off it. But we've got our Xeon CPU, which I kind of like having in here. It's a little bit different. This machine did come optional with an i7 4770, I think it is, but yeah. And here's our weedy little GT620, 2GB of onboard memory. However, I wonder what happens if you spend a little bit of extra money. So for 80 bucks I went on Facebook Marketplace and I bought this used BioStar RX 550 GPU. With the lack of external PCIe power, we're limited to the 320 watt power supply, and there's a maximum of 75 watts the PCIe bus can output. So this card just scrapes through there. It is the fastest card I could get, second hand of course, with 4 gigs of video memory. So I've pulled out my 620, which you can see here, and we'll throw in the Radeon card. Not many options for sure when you're playing with hardware that doesn't support an external power supply. It's really annoying. But hey, we're going to do a comparison between the two so you can see just what a little bit of extra money might get you if you find a video card that works with such a machine. For games like CSGO, you really want to try and keep above 60 FPS there, so that smoke screen always is an interesting one to try out. This benchmark is available on the Steam Workshop for CSGO, so I'd definitely check it out if you guys want to have a wee look there. But I figured I'd try out some Grand Theft Auto 4. It's a slightly more modern title. I don't actually have many more modern games, but yeah, it's always a good test just to see what the cards can do. It's quite interesting actually running these built-in benchmarks. So you can see we got 43 FPS, blazing fast, versus the 63 from the Radeon card. But the other thing I like to do is actually play the game, and it reveals a bit more. So with everything happening, we're getting dips down to 24 FPS with the Nvidia card, so I wouldn't consider that very enjoyable, especially at 1024 by 768 resolution. And yes, I am playing all of these benchmarks and games on low settings at 1024 by 768 with VSync off. just because that's what the monitor I've got plugged in supports. So yeah, it's good to see, at least with the Radeon card, we are getting pretty decent FPS, which means it should hopefully translate a bit better to those higher resolutions, whereas the Nvidia card's going to be a bit spanked. I mean, we're barely touching 30 FPS on GTA 5 here, which is a much more modern title than the card actually should support. So the fact that it's actually working and, you know, we're getting any sort of FPS is kind of a miracle. So yeah, what can you do? But hey, at least with a cheap GPU thrown in, and maybe even potentially a better power supply if you could retrofit something, it's looking pretty good for the Radeon upgrade here. And it yeah, definitely a good bang for buck card.
Hey man, what's up? Calling you back about the list off Del Perro Boulevard. God damn you!
I don't have too many modern games because I'm spending so many hours and months trying to catch up on older games I haven't yet been able to play, but one of the few I do have is BeamNG, and this is a fantastic sort of game to play if you want to really test your GPU, because a lot of physics are done on this and the textures are not as well optimized as a lot of AAA titles. So we're cracking along at 60 odd FPS for the Radeon card, once again at 1024 by 768 resolution with low graphics settings. Nvidia is hosed here, we're barely cracking 10 FPS, but yeah, what can you do? Once again, it's a pretty weak graphics card. But yeah, nice and playable, at least on the Radeon. It's not very modern by today's standards, but Watch Dogs 2 here, Nvidia card, yeah, this wouldn't be very playable, and it's certainly not very enjoyable just to showcase this one, but Radeon's definitely got a bit more behind it. I suspect that at higher resolutions, 1080p and stuff like that, the Radeon still would struggle, but hopefully at least you'd be able to get 30 FPS out of it. But yeah, at least yeah, there's an upgrade path that you could actually go to play games such as this. And this is not a new modern game, so yeah, maybe it's just not that well optimized. Well, enough of mucking around. Does it run Crysis? Well, I downloaded the 3D Guru Crisis demo and the utility that goes with it. You can see here the frame rates. Once again, 1024 by 768 on a low resolution. The Radeon card did finish first, leaving the GT far behind as it's ticking along. It is still kind of doing it, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's that playable, especially when you want to bump up to higher resolutions. But however, we did crack almost 60 FPS and 112 for the Radeon card, so not a bad show there actually. At this point I really just wanted to sit down and play some of my favourite games, one of them being Battlefield 3. I do love the campaign with this, very playable on the Radeon card as well. One of the only other modern titles I've got is Black Mesa. Definitely worth playing. If you guys haven't played this one, it's definitely worth it. Great fun. The Radeon card, yep, we're cracking along just fine, above 100 FPS. I'm sure it dips in places, but very enjoyable. Once again at 1024 by 768 resolution. Definitely not a modern resolution standard. Well, that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to do with the machine, is just have a spare little gaming machine handy, just if I want to take it anywhere outside of home. It's much easier than trying to unpack my main gaming rig. But yeah, I just also really was keen to see if you spent under $100 extra on a machine like this, what sort of performance could you squeak out of it? I do have the i7 variant of the CPU that came with these machines, but I'm feeling like with the GPU I've fitted, I really don't want to push that power supply too far. It's already crap enough as is, so I'm just going to leave it be with the Xeon platform in there. But yeah, it was a great fun. I definitely recommend going with the newer models though. They are better value, hopefully they have a better power supply. But this was a free machine that all I've done is I've spent 80 New Zealand dollars on a second-hand video card. But yeah, it was a bit of fun anyway. Alrighty, I'll leave you guys to it, and thanks for watching.